And before I forget, could I please ask everybody to make sure you're on mute? Because I usually forget that. Hi, everybody. I'm Marilyn London, and I am membership chairman and on the board of the Stirling Road Library. And I am welcoming you to tonight. And we are all very excited to listen to what Batia has to say. Before you have that pleasure, I'm just going to say a word or two about the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. Looking at the participants, I see that almost everybody is already a friend, and I thank you all so very much. Because of your support, we are able to have Batia, and I see Jerry is with us tonight, and we're able to have Jerry's New Yorker program and many of the other wonderful programs that we have, but we could not do this without your support. So I thank you. If anybody else is here for the first time or does not know about the library, friends, check us out at www.stirlingroad.org. See all the programs and all the things that we do and that we provide, both virtually and in person. And we look forward to you also becoming a friend. The library has 20 years in existence, and we had a big birthday party on Sunday, and the attendance was unbelievable. Both the children, the adults, it was just a crazy, wonderful, wonderful day. The friends are up to like almost 475 members, which is insane, but we need your support. So, you know, please do that. The cost could be as low as $10 a year. And for $10 a year, you couldn't even listen to Batia for $10 for one lecture. And when you become a friend, everything is free. Because we do that, we pay our, you know, people who do the facilities, we support the library, and we underwrite the library, and we support the community. So very briefly, everybody I hope is getting their newsletters. And if you're not getting your emails, please leave me a note in the chat, and I will make sure that you are getting what you're supposed to be getting in email. Read them to know what's going on. Just remember, every Wednesday evening, Jerry has a wonderful discussion on the New Yorker magazine that we welcome you to join us and register for that in advance. We have Shelley, who will be doing summer hours Thursday evening. If you haven't registered for Shelley, he's a gem. So please do that as well. In person, we will be having book club next Tuesday, and Linda will be discussing the Bookwoman's daughter, and Emmanuel that same evening will be virtually doing his music program. So we can keep you as busy can be. Miriam also will be doing her short story on the 25th of July, and Batia, of course, will be back again later this month, and she will talk about that when she does. So without going in further ado, we are waiting to hear. We all have families. Now Batia is going to talk to us about the artists who also have families. So we'll hear this fascinating topic that she has, and take it away. Thank you so much, Batia.
I'm gonna share my screen then, and we'll start with the class. The idea of this class actually is very, very new. This is, I just prepared for today. It is a class that I've never given before, but it helped me understand what was the deal with painting families, with doing this kind of composition. And we have very little of their own family, like the artist family, until I would say the 17th century, or even until the Impressionists. So we're going to see what happens and what is the depiction of families before that. And we have to go first to the Roman Empire. So what we have here is the representation of a family. We see a man, a woman, and two children. But this is an official painting. It is a painting done on a wall. It is a fresco of a Roman emperor. This is Septimus Severus. And it was an obligation in all of the different colonies and all of the different states of the empire to have a painting with the image of the emperor. So it was mass produced, and they would be putting them in a public building. So it looks like later it was made into a circle. It was first a square, and it was made a circle. But in this case, it's very interesting to see what's happening, because we see a very rigid representation of a family, a man, the husband, the wife, etc., and 2 children. But one of them, it doesn't have a face. It has been erased. Somehow, something happened. We know that they did have 2 children. One is Geta and the other one is Caracalla. And we don't know which one is which. Of course, we don't have their names written down in this painting. But one of them is erased, as I mentioned. So we know that Geta is assassinated. So probably Geta is erased from history. But on the other hand, this painting was found in Egypt. And Caracalla did a lot of killings in Alexandria, so they didn't like him. So probably the people there erased his face. We don't know exactly what happened, but this is one of the first paintings that we have of a family. And we know also that it has the same style of the mummy portraits that are going to happen more or less at the same time. When the Roman Empire came into Egypt, it started to change the traditions in Egyptian culture. So instead of those big sarcophagus, we're going to have this kind of mummified version of a sarcophagus with only the image of the man, as we see right here. And we don't see the rest of the body painted or etc. And this is from Fayum. And if we see here, it is made in Fayum, a place that we see here very near the river valley, but actually, I'm sorry, the valley, the Nile Valley, but it is on one side in an oasis, which is called Fayum. And Alexandria is right here. So we do see there is an influence in this kind of representation, even though it was an official portrait of the emperor's family. But we have to get going into history and what happens. So we still don't have any artists who are going to paint their own families. But what do they paint during the Middle Ages? They paint the Holy Family. And we have the structure of the family: the husband, the wife, and the children, of course. The child, in this case, is Jesus Christ. And we see a nativity. This is the moment when Jesus Christ is born. Il Duccio, one of the famous artists before the Renaissance, because of course, during the Renaissance, during the Middle Ages, we have anonymous artists. And then we have artists like Giotto, like Duccio, that we know their names. And afterwards, they are precursors of the Renaissance. So we have on both sides the prophets, Isaiah and Ezekiel. But the important thing here is that we see Joseph, we see the Virgin Mary, we see Jesus Christ. As you can see, all of the angels are looking inside the barn of what's happening. And then we have also here the midwives who are washing the baby. So there's kind of an action in this representation, but we still have the image of a family, a holy family. But when we see the paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, we have an image of a much more relaxed representation of a family. Even though it's a holy representation, it is probably a commission for a church or an altar, which would be a private altar. It would have the topic would have to be sacred. It would have to be a religious topic. So this is a preparatory sketch that Leonardo da Vinci made, and he never made a painting, but it was commissioned by Louis XII. And probably it was for his wife, Anne of Bretagne. And it's called the Burlington House cartoon because it is there, or at least it was there. Today it's at the National Gallery in London. But what we have here is a representation of a specific group of people that are all related. So we have the Virgin, which is this one, and which is the mother of the Virgin. We see the baby, Jesus Christ, and St. John, he is a cousin. So we have also that this sketch probably was made because Anne of Bretagne was from Nantes, and in Nantes, Saint Anne was venerated. So it has to do with that, the origin of Anne and Saint Anne. On the other hand, we know that she was pregnant at the time, and Saint Anne is the patron of Saint Mothers and also pregnant women. So it all makes sense that the king would order or would commission this kind of painting from Leonardo da Vinci, but he never finished it. And it is kind of strange to see this kind of composition because, and I'm going to go back to it. When you see that the Virgin Mary is sitting on the lap of Saint Anne, it's kind of strange for us to see it that way, but it is a tradition. And there are so many other examples from the Middle Ages that we see that relationship. One is sitting on top of the other, and Saint Anne right here is a larger character, and the Virgin Mary is sitting on her lap. And then on her lap, we see Jesus Christ standing up. So we see the three generations, one by one. So this tradition is going to be painted also by Leonardo da Vinci. We see her here looking down and to her what her baby is doing. So it's a little more relaxed because Leonardo da Vinci was looking into actual people, and he would use models for his paintings. That wouldn't happen before during the Middle Ages. During the Renaissance, we see this kind of representation that is much more natural and is looking back to Mary as well. And all of the gestures, everything is very natural. There's a lot of movement. And look at this image right here, this scene of Jesus Christ blessing John, which we see right here. So there's a movement of the body of the baby. And as I mentioned, he never did a painting. This is a preparatory sketch. Usually we see that there are some signs in the preparatory sketch or cartoon to be transferred into a wooden panel, like holes or carbon that would be transferred. But in this case, we don't see it. Of course, we don't have a painting done that it is the same. We see that it is a wonderful sketch, but there are some parts that are not finished, like the hand, for example. But look at how he paints the shadows and lights and the movement of these two children. And also we see here that there are other drawings before that Leonardo made, and then he made the sketch, the preparatory sketch. But as I mentioned, he never did the actual painting. But what I want you to see as well is that he's including the landscape, things that we're going to see later in the Mona Lisa and other paintings as well. So the faces are finished completely, and there are shadows, there are lights, but there are other things that are just the line of it, like the hand. But we already see the gesture of that hand looking up, the finger pointing up, because she's pointing towards God, towards heaven. And also this interaction between them. There's this tenderness. There's this beautiful communication through gazes, through a small smile. Well, just only the head turning into Mary. So that is something that Leonardo knew how to do. But also the details are really interesting because we see that he never finished even the sketch. Look at the feet right here. We see only the contours, the outline of the feet. And even this one looks like it's deformed. So it's really interesting to see the process of an artist when he's making this kind of representation. So it is a family, but it's not Leonardo da Vinci's family. He never painted his family, but he's going to go on and on painting this kind of holy family. As we can see in the Virgin of the Rocks, and this is just one of the two versions, there's a link between the two, because again, we see the representation of Mary, we see Jesus Christ, and we see, Jesus Christ on this side, and St. John on this side. And again, we see Jesus Christ blessing John, and an angel right here, Angel Gabriel. So it has a very different composition. The Virgin of the Rocks has the triangular composition that Leonardo da Vinci is going to use, and other artists during the Renaissance is going to use. In this case, we don't have that clear. There's not a triangle whatsoever. We see the process with detailed sketches like this representation of the sleeve with all of the creases of the fabric, and how the movement of the hand is going to be done, as you can see here, because she is holding the baby when Jesus Christ is moving towards St. John. So we see that he studied a lot before doing the preparatory sketch. And artists that were his pupils, his disciples, are going to use exactly the same idea. Melzi, who was one of his pupils, is going to use the same composition of the hand, the gesture of the face that Leonardo da Vinci did in this sketch. So we can trace back how he was influenced by his teacher. The facial features of Mary, like we see in detail, are exactly the same as Leonardo da Vinci made before. Of course, we see a finished product in Melzi's painting, while we see on Leonardo's side only a sketch. But you can see already that he's learning from his teacher. Another version, another sketch, another drawing that he made with a similar composition was done by Michelangelo, because we see Saint Anne, we see Mary, and we see the Jesus Christ, the baby Jesus right here. So it has also that interaction between the two women, as we find in Leonardo da Vinci's painting or drawing or sketch. And then he's going to use a different composition with the same idea, but we don't see John anymore. It is a commission for an altarpiece for the Church of Santissima Annunziata in Florence. He never finished it, by the way. It looks almost finished, but he didn't finish it. And it does have a pyramidal form. It's this triangle that he's going to be known for, because he was looking into the geometry of the Greco-Roman period. So we see the Virgin looking down at Jesus Christ, and is looking also this scene that's happening. So even though it's a different composition, it's the same idea of those three generations, but in this case, without John. He's going to include that atmospheric background that we're going to see over and over in other paintings, the Virgin of the Rocks, the Mona Lisa, and many others. He uses also the idea of how we see things, and everything becomes very blurry when it's far away. He uses also studies of the landscape, and he writes down a lot about it. He would study geology, the rocks. He would go and walk around different places to study the geography of a place. Also, his interest in hydrology, how the water comes from one place to the other. He has a lot of studies for the Arno River in Florence, and we see also drawings that he made of mountains, of rocks, of different landscapes where he would walk around. And he has a lot of notes about the sky, the horizon, and how he has to paint hazy and white in the background, because as he, I'm going to quote him, is the moisture that captures the rays of the sun. Beyond the sun and us, there is darkness, and so the air appears blue. And that's why he puts this color that is kind of a grayish, bluish color in the background. And the landscape has a lot of meaning. There's a lot of symbolism. There's a tree that is flourishing right here. The land is barren, and everything looks like it's very, very, I would say, kind of a desertic kind of place, but also untouched by human hand. It looks like there's rain because there is a tree flourishing, so it's also fertile. And that meaning has to do with what we call the Immaculate Conception. The Virgin Mary, and I'm going to repeat, she was a virgin, and Anne also couldn't conceive until late in life. And also we see in the scriptures that she was also conceived with, with divine intervention. So this is what it means. The landscape means that we have this heavenly rain, and that is why we have the tree. It's a barren landscape. Also, Mary has to have divine intervention to have Jesus Christ, and Anne as well, to have the Virgin Mary, to give birth to the Virgin Mary. She did have divine intervention. And then we see Jesus Christ. He's playing with the lamb. Also, the lamb has some kind of significance because it represents the passion of Christ, the suffering. He's going to die on the cross, and this is what the lamb means. Mary, who's looking at him, he wants to spare his son of this destiny. She knows what's coming, but she is looking at him with tenderness and a little bit of melancholy. And the idea of him playing with the lamb means that this is going to happen. And on the other hand, represents the church. She also knows what is going to happen, and Jesus Christ is going to die on the cross. But also look at the sketch, because we find that Leonardo da Vinci knew how to capture all of this kind of expressions on their faces, on the women's faces. The gaze of the three of them connect through this diagonal line. All of them are connected, and with that, of course, triangular shape that we have seen. Artists like Raphael are going to look into the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci, and a similar composition happened in this painting, although, of course, we don't see Saint Anne, we see Joseph, but there is also a line of communication between those gazes, between the three of them, and the baby is playing again with the lamb. So those three figures are interconnected, but the two mothers, they have more or less the same age. Imagine Saint Anne is represented here as a young woman, the same as her daughter, more or less. Both are virgin mothers, and this is called Maria Formitas, that they both have the same shape and both are saints. So that is why there's no distinction. There's an idealized idea of the virgins, the two virgins. That is why he's painting them like that. On the other hand, when we see the baby, Jesus, what is the significance of the lamb? The lamb means the passion of Christ. And the passion of Christ are all of the things that he's going to suffer until he's going to be crucified. So that is the lamb. That's what it means. The passion of Christ. So when we see Jesus Christ, we find him playing as any child would do, with a dog or with a lamb in this case. He would study different children around the streets, and he would capture their movement, how they interact with an animal, how they see their mother or somebody else. Look at the different interactions with probably cats or any other animals that we have here with children, just moving around, playing with the animal and holding it at some point, as you see in this detail. Also, he's going to study light and shadow on fabrics, how this is going to affect on a painting, how you see the creases, how do you see all of the different movements of the body on the with the fabric. So he studies a lot of that. And we see this sketch on the right-hand side, and it is a little bit different. We have the same idea, Saint Anne, the Virgin Mary. So it's a different version. He never did this one in color as well, but look how she is sitting on top of her lap. And probably here we could see, probably, I'm not so sure, but it could be Joseph. And then we see Jesus Christ playing with the lamb. He decided to do it differently. And he was studying different postures, different kind of movements, and he is placing them in different places. For example, here we see an arch. It is an interior scene, and it's probably represented inside a loggia or a terrace, as we have in this sketch. He decides to have an open landscape instead of placing the Virgin and Saint Anne and Jesus Christ inside a church or a palace, etc. So when this painting was restored in the year 2012, it was really a scandal. There was an argument that it was too bright. So there was so much problems between them that the scientific committee resigned after this. But still, we see that the restoration, in my view, looks really beautiful. So, of course, there are moments that we see that they do too much. We get to Sigmund Freud because he wrote an essay about Leonardo da Vinci, a memory of his childhood. And he started to analyze this painting. And it's really interesting to see that he figured that there was a vulture represented here in the fabric and the clothes of the Virgin Mary. And he goes back to the idea that Leonardo da Vinci was, in the words of Freud, a passive homosexual, and that he had a fantasy when he was a child, and he wrote about it in one of the manuscripts, in the Codex Atlanticus. So he recounts that he was attacked by this vulture when he was an infant in his crib. And this is what supposedly said, and this is a German translation and now translated into English, but it read like this: "It seems that I was always destined to be so deeply concerned with vultures, for I recall as one of my very earliest memories that while I was in my cradle, a vulture came down to me and opened my mouth with its tail and struck me many times with its tail against my lips. But actually it was mistranslated. And the word vulture in Italian was mistranslated because it meant a kite, that a kite somehow flew into his crib. Some interpretations are really interesting to see. That's why I'm bringing it here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have to wait until the 17th century to actually see real people being portrayed as a family. And this happened in paintings in the golden age of the Dutch painters, of the Dutch artists. And here we have this portrait by Frans Hals. They are in this also a representation of a whole family, wife and husband, 2 children. They are in a terrace. We have also a landscape in the back. They are wearing their elegant but very austere garb, which was the fad at the time. The man is kind of speaking. Look at the hand gesture. He's saying something. And the woman is looking at us. He's engaging us. She's inviting us in. But at the same time, she's also smiling. And we think that she's listening to what her husband is saying. Look at also her hand. She's pointing to her husband. And they are wearing this black dresses with ruffles and wristbands that contrast with the black dress. And the only color that we see on the dress is in this small child. They both are laughing, they're holding hands, and they wear a different kind of ornament in their garments because they are lace trim caps and also colors. The detail of the landscape is really interesting because he never painted outside. Frans Hals never went outside to paint. He executed it in his studio inside. And probably the backdrop, all of this landscape, was painted by another artist. And we think, and these are some studies, that it was another hand that painted this, Peter de Molijn. The overgrown plants on top of the building give us the feeling of a ruin. But also we see the garden in the back and another house, and probably looks like a church with a tower. And also we see a curtain, which this is a transition between the outside and the interior. Other things that we have in this painting are a wine glass and a lemon that we have here on the table. Exotic fruits were very expensive, so it shows that they were wealthy. Also, they would use a lemon or any other exotic fruit like an orange to flavor water. And it shows that they could afford this. Roses on the floor also have the meaning of nobility and also a much deeper significance, which is a transient life, something that passes and it dies. So we have to take advantage. So as I mentioned, during the golden era of the Dutch paintings, we have many of these family portraits. A wealthy family is going to show off whatever they have. So they do have their silverware, very exotic fruits on the table. They are part of the merchant class. Not only that, look at the table. It is covered with also this kind of fabric that comes from far away, from an exotic land. And they do have servants. So we see them in the back, bringing something or cleaning something. And then we have a fabric that is hanging right here. So we can see the open window. And also, when we see an open window, we start to wonder what's happening on the other side. Probably there's this relation between the interior and the outside world. Is there a garden? Or probably there's nice weather and they are just opening the door, the window. The warm colors of the painting also gives us the sense of a nice family and how they are being portrayed. We have also paintings on the walls, and the only one who's looking at us again is a woman. The women in general, and we know that for because different documents state that they would be in charge of decorating their house, so they would purchase paintings, and they are showing us how she's in charge, and she is the one who's looking out of the painting. Then we have other elements like this broom, and they were Calvinist, and following the Calvinist teachings, the broom means they work and they're cleaning, and it is a virtue, a domestic virtue of usually the lady of the house. There's also a dog, and this has to do also with the child that is here, a baby, because it has the idea of education. The child is full of amulets. He is a baby, and of course they want to just try to protect him of the evil eye. So we have a lot of amulets. And then another detail that also shows their wealth is that she has a very small item right here, which is a warming oven. So it's an interesting representation that is not only portraying a family, it represents their wealth, their well-being, of course, a merchant class, what they have. So it's kind of an inventory of what they have in their house. And they do have also servants and a nice house. We have a very famous family portrayed by Velázquez and Las Meninas, the ladies in waiting. But it is a family painting, and we find them here, all of them together, and it's really interesting to see the setting. First of all, we have art in this beautiful place. Both are paintings by Rubens, because this room became like a museum of the palace. And this is where Velázquez would work. But both stories of what is portrayed right here, it has to do with Minerva, and she's a goddess of wisdom, and she's the patron of the art. So of course there's a deeper meaning. On the other hand, we see the representation of the mirror, or a painting of the queen and the king. And on the left-hand side, we see the female characters. On the right-hand side, we see the male characters, and it goes along with the painting of the kings. On this side, we still have more paintings, some by Jacob Jordaens, and the others are by Juan Bautista del Mazo, who was married to Velázquez's daughter. He was his son-in-law. We have a lot of information. I'm not going to go so deep, but I'm going to explain a little bit about Velázquez's paintings of Las Meninas, because what it shows here is not only a family portrait, it is what painting could achieve, what is happening here. It is that art and life are an illusion. And this meaning of the relationship between illusion and reality comes from a tradition of the Spanish literature. Even Calderón de la Barca's play Life is a Dream tells us about it. So this is his studio, Velázquez's studio, and it became a kind of this museum when the heir to the throne died, Baltasar Charles, and because he lived here before, and after he died as a child, these quarters were given to Velázquez. Now he's wearing a belt with the keys because Velázquez is in charge of opening the court offices. So he has to show also what his post is in the court. The original name of this painting was La Familia, the family. In the inventory, we see that And in the 18th century, an artist who was working in the palace, Antonio Palomino, he's going to write the names and he's going to identify each one of the character right here. And he says also that the painting was cut down on both sides. And we see, of course, in the center, the Infanta Margarita Teresa. She was 5 years old. Las Meninas, who are the ladies in waiting, are on her side. Doña Isabel de Velasco, Doña María Agustina Sarmiento y Sotomayor. And we have that they frame the image of the Infanta. It is really a very beautiful setting that we see all in this very muted colors. And she is offering her to drink from this red clay cup. It's called a bucaro, and it came from Mexico, one of the colonies in Guadalajara, which we see right here that they still do this kind of clay pottery. And they would put water in it because it would add a fragrant flavor. And it became kind of a passion for the girls to nibble the rims of this clay cup, and it would lighten the skin. By the way, this kind of clay would have some lead. So imagine, of course, it would be poisonous. But at the time, they did not know that. They would help their skin to be lighter. On the other hand, we see that cup, it gives us this splash of red. We don't know if she just finished it or she's about to drink it. And we see all of the reds that are represented here gives us a balance of reds in the painting. It is rather interesting how he plays them. On the right-hand side, we see the dwarves that were part of the family. They were the entertainers of the court, and they would grow old with all of the people from the court. We see them also here. One is Mari Barbola, which we know she came from Germany. The other one is Nicolas Pertusato, who was an Italian boy, and he is playing with this mastiff, with this dog. Also, the dog is part of the family. We see those dogs represented in many occasions in different paintings, as we see in this one of Philip IV, also painted by Velázquez. So we see that the dogs or those kind of animals, they also part of the family. In the back, we see Doña Marcela de Ulloa. She was the chaperone of the princess, and the bodyguard, or guardamamas, who we do not know his name, which we see him right here. Ulloa had lost her husband, so she's dressed in mourning as a nun. And then we have other details. All of the gazes, how they look into each other, is this network, this communication between all of them, between the painter, the model, the viewer, and we have in total 9 figures. 4 are interacting with each other. They are looking at each other, even the dog, of course. Some of them are looking out, like Velázquez. We see also the Infanta, and also we see that one of the Meninas. The vanishing point, well, also Mari Barbola, I'm sorry, I didn't. And we have that the vanishing point goes exactly into the open door. And there is also it draws our attention because on that door, we see Don José Nieto Velázquez. Probably he was related to Velázquez himself, to the painter. He has the same last name, but he was a Queen's Chamberlain. He was also an artist, and he was the head of the Royal Tapestry Works, which was a very important business for the court. And we have him here trying to, we don't know exactly if he is waiting for the Queen and the King to go out, so he's holding the curtain, or he is coming down into the palace. Here we have another, the image of him, of Nieto, by Velázquez, by the way. And the idea of the light coming from another room is also very interesting. It looks like there is the reflection on the mirror because of the light that comes from here and also from the windows we're going to see. We don't see the features that are really very clear on the image of the King and the Queen, but they are looking directly into the viewer. We see them and they see us. But where are they? Is it a mirror? Is it a painting? It's also one of the mysteries. There is a lot of discussion of what is happening there. And other paintings done by Velázquez, like this Venus and her toilette, shows that he was interested in reflection. Here we have another interaction of the Venus looking into the mirror, and she's looking into out to us, to the viewer. There are many different versions of where are the king and queen, and probably they are in front of the Infanta Margarita, and that is why there is a reflection on the window, I'm sorry, on the mirror, and the Infanta is right here, and she's looking into her father's and her mother's eyes. Velázquez is also looking out because he's painting something, and we see the reflection on that mirror. So different studies that where are they standing? Again, we see another study with the vanishing point and the image of the painting that is almost the same dimension as the canvas that Velázquez is painting. Velázquez, of course, is looking at us. And this is the only double portrait of the royal couple. Velázquez painted both of them in one frame. And even though he painted them in different occasions, they have their own paintings. Many of them, by the way, done by Velázquez and by other artists as well. And Nieto, as I mentioned, is right here. Nieto Velázquez is right here. He is seen only, nobody else is looking at him. We are looking at him, and the queen and the king are looking at him. So probably he's waiting for them to go out, and the Menina, the Menina who's courting, she's making a courtesy right here, because probably they are standing up to go out, and Margarita is looking also at her parents. It becomes a riddle. We have that there's a lot of analysis of this painting. As I mentioned, the canvas is very, very large, and it's almost the size of the canvas itself that Velázquez is painting. He does a study of light and shadow, and he goes from light to darkness. The whole composition is divided in two. In the foreground, we can see the light, and if you go farther away, there's dark. But he plays a lot with proportions, with also measurements. He does a lot of studying of the space itself, and also of the light. Here we have the ceiling on one side and the floor on the other side. And then we have a perfect balance between the space. Look also at the light. There are two sources of light. One that comes from a place that we don't know exactly. The natural light comes from the window. The other one is from this area right here. So that light that comes from that window is going to illuminate the king and queen that supposedly are there. It's also going to illuminate Margarita, that we see her right here, and also the face, the right side of her cheek of one of the Meninas. If you see here, the Infanta, Margarita, is fully illuminated. She's facing towards the window, so we can see her full face and her gestures also, and her features, but she's looking frontally, directly towards us. Look at the stiffness of her dress and these bodies that she's using, but also the light of the whole fabric right there. We have the other characters, the other people that are more in the shadows. Hand gestures are going to be very important, because this hand of Ulloa is going to be mimicked by one of the dwarfs, and we see that in a very playful manner, with more movement, there is also this communication between those hand gestures. Velázquez is looking towards outside the painting or looking into the faces of the king and the queen. We know also they had a very close relationship. He had a very close relationship with the king. He would often go and watch him work in his studio. And the king never wanted to be portrayed as an old man, but he allowed Velázquez to paint him in Las Meninas as a blurry image, as you can see. Velázquez is going to receive the Order of Santiago, which was an honor. When he finished this painting, and 3 years after, he's going to receive it. There is a story that probably Felipe, the king, ordered to add the symbol of the Order of Santiago after Velázquez died. And there is a story that probably the king himself painted it. We know also that he wrote, the king wrote, when Velázquez died, I am crushed, and he wrote it in a memorandum when he was choosing the successor of the painter. And then we have a very interesting painting done by Velázquez's son-in-law. He married Velázquez's daughter, Juan Bautista Martínez del Mazo, and he paints his own family. So he paints his children, he paints his wife, he paints also himself, and also he includes, and following the teachings of Velázquez, he's going to include the painting by Velázquez of Philip IV. Also, he's going to paint another space that it looks like the studio where Velázquez would paint from another angle. And if you can see this window, we would see the other side of the room. We would be standing on this side looking this way, but Del Mazo is going to paint the other side of the room. It would be this window, it would be the same as this one. And here we have Velázquez or Del Mazo himself painting some of the infantas. So Del Mazo also is painting his family, and looking into paintings that were done by Velázquez, he's going to use the same idea of illusion. In the painting by Velázquez on your right-hand side, you have the same square as we find in Del Mazo's painting. In this case, we don't know if it's if it's actually a painting or another room painted inside the same scene. The same goes to say with the painting of Las Meninas, where we find the reflection or maybe a painting and another space in the back. When we see the paintings by Goya, these are also very interesting because we don't see that Goya is going to paint his own family. He's going to paint the family of royalty. And this is Don Luis, who was the brother of the King Carlos or Charles III. And there's a reference, of course, of Velázquez Las Meninas, but also it's in a much more relaxed way. The center character is Maria Teresa, and her wife. I'm sorry, her husband. And it is also kind of a narrative because what are they doing? They are relaxed. This is the evening. She has her hair undone. They're playing cards. There is a candle here illuminating, and Goya is painting, and he is showing his back because he's painting as a whole scene. So there are members of the household, the whole family, and even a friend, the composer, probably the composer Luigi Boccherini. We also see that Goya is going to use perspective, using the shadows, a curtain, and the easel itself, where he's painting, giving us also this balance with diagonals that cross over the composition. Maria Teresa was 30 years younger than her husband. Don Luis is right here, sitting down. He's looking like completely lost or distracted. He looks old. And there's this girl who's the only kind of playful character in the whole scene, even though these women are also looking out. He was known as a young man to bring prostitutes to the woods of the royal hunting expeditions, and he was kind of a loose cannon. And Goya writes in this portrait of him that it took him only 3 hours to make. Goya makes a different representation of a family, the Osuna family. They look like puppets. Instead of putting them in a much more relaxed way as he did the family of Don Luis. Probably he's criticizing the aristocracy. The boy right here has a stick, probably as a horse playing. The girls they have some fans, and they're all very stiff, very rigid. This girl right here is going to become the Marquesa de Santa Cruz, and she's also going to be painted by Goya later on in life. But look at the difference between these two. We have Franz Hals on the left and Goya on the right, a few, of course, centuries afterwards. But there is a difference. One is showing the landscape, the atmosphere, the ambience of the place. The other one is just showing the family. And we don't see anything painted extra. We see only the toys of the children, even this carriage that the boy is playing. A very different version of the family of the king and queen is shown also by Goya. It is this era of the revolution. They're a little bit afraid of what's happening in France. They are in Spain. They have to show that they are very healthy, the well-being of the monarchy. They have informal postures. They're not stiff as the Osuna, and they're looking to different directions. They are showing their personality even. They are almost life-size. There is a rather large painting. Here we have the king and queen, but it's not exactly the light on them. The light is everywhere. And they are shown as a family with a lot of affection. The queen is holding and hugging her children, her daughter. She's holding her son, and we see him all. Of course, we can recognize each one of them. And Maria Luisa was the daughter of Felipe, who was the Duke of Parma. They were cousins. And look at the jewelry that she's wearing. They had a special jeweler for the court, Léonard Chopinot, who was a French, and one of those jewels had been preserved, like you see here on the right-hand side. This belonged to Maria Luisa. Maria Luisa is shown as she looked at that time. She had lost her teeth. She had many, many births. She actually had 14. Only 6 children survived into adulthood. And she was very sick at the time. And she's shown like that. But also we see some kind of politics. The Prince Ferdinand, which is here, we didn't know at the time who was going to be his bride. So the bride is right there looking towards the back, so we don't see her face because we don't know who's going to be his bride. Then we see the other infantes, or the children of the court, Carlos Maria Isidro, who was 12 years old. We see the Infanta Maria Josefa, who's an old lady. She was the sister of Carlos, of Charles IV. And Goya himself has painted here his image, painting also in front of a canvas. So the same as Velázquez did before. The king is shown here with the sash of the order of the King Carlos III, and also the sash of the Golden Fleece, which was created by his wife, Maria Luisa. And then we see other members of the family, like the brother of the king, Antonio Pascual, and his wife, and the Infanta Carlota Joaquina, the Queen of Portugal. And also here we have the younger generation, Don Luis de Bourbon, who was the Prince of Parma, and his wife, Maria Luisa, and the baby. So the whole family is portrayed here, and they are shown in this kind of very subtle hierarchy. There's no narrative, there's nothing else, just a portrait. There's no crowns, there's nothing else. It's an idealized version of the family. We know that 8 years later, Ferdinand, which we see right here, the prince, is going to force his parents to abdicate. So there was already a kind of a revolution behind the scenes. Also, the paintings that are shown in the back, like Lot and his daughters, it is a critique of what was happening, and Goya knew about it, and probably showing the corruption of the reign already. And he chooses to put that painting. And we get to a representation done by Gustav Klimt. And even though he did not paint his family, he's going to portray a cluster of human bodies that represent life and family. And at the same time, there's also the idea of death, because life ends. And here we have the skull with all of the crosses and a club that is out to get this otherwise beautiful scene of a cluster of people. So we have a couple right here, a baby, and some other female figures that are holding up all of this cluster of people, the textures of fabric, and all of them are cuddling. So it looks like a beautiful scene, but there's something going on that is kind of shady, that death is out to get them. It is a reference to Christianity, of course, but also it is a reference to that life is going to end. We know that his mother died in 1915, and that is when he made some changes. And probably this is when he included those crosses and the skull itself in this painting. He's going to separate all of the bodies just with the textures of colors that we have here. And we can see the nude figures and also the shape of the bodies cuddling, and at the same time, the different colors of skin. The man is represented here with darker color skin, and all of the female figures have very white skin, the baby kind of pinkish. So it is, of course, the representation of life, a family that get together, they have a child, and all of those female figures that are holding him up, kind of angels, I would say, but they're not really angels. The only image of, the only figure that is looking out is this one. All of the rest, they have their eyes closed. And the only one who interacts with the viewer is that one over there in the circle. Here we have the detail of it. Look at the wonderful use of color on the flesh in each one of the figures. Another painting, The Bride, also shows this cuddling cluster, but in this case is an unfinished painting because he died in 1918, so it is unfinished. All of the different textures, the battle, it is called The Bride. The bride is in the center, but the battle also between lust and love. And look at this man, which is looking at her. The bride is innocently closing her eyes. All of the sensual women with their naked bodies, and this gaze, this lascivious gaze that he has. On the other side, we see that he didn't finish, and we don't know exactly what was going to be placed right here in this area, and probably he would introduce another skull, maybe reflecting on his own life. He had many lovers, and he had probably syphilis at this point, and he died suddenly. We have a photograph of his studio where this painting was found when he died, this unfinished painting. And before we leave, I want to show you Frida Kahlo's family, because we have the perfect example of the genealogy. And she showed herself as a little kid in the center of the patio of her house in Coyoacán called La Casa Azul, the blue house. And the title of the painting is My Grandparents, My Parents, and I. And we find that she took a photograph of her parents to be inspired to do the portrait of them here. And here we have that her mother is pregnant with her sister. Of course, Cristina was born later. She is a younger sister of Frida Kahlo. And in this portrait of her family, we see also what was represented here, the countryside. She lived in Coyoacán, but she's going to introduce the ocean, which was not near the area of Coyoacán because she lived in what today is Mexico City. On the other hand, we see that there is a division between the two families. One is very clearly shown as a mestizo family, the combination of Spaniard with an indigenous man. And also on the father's side, they were European, and she's showing them here together. And the union, of course, is going to become this, first, it looks like a ribbon that she's holding, and she's showing her own house, as I mentioned, in Coyoacán. She is portraying also her father, who was from Germany. And there is also a discussion, there's always some other book that comes out that they say that he was Jewish, and another book said it proved them wrong, that he came from a Lutheran family. No matter, he is going to become a photographer, and Frida Kahlo is going to portray him as that. So she includes the camera in the back, and she also is going to use some of the photographs. When she made this portrait, her father was already dead. On the other hand, she uses something very traditional that is called ex voto, where you see an image of something that has happened, and miraculously, because of the Virgin that appeared, they survived this assault. So the whole story is written right here in the ex voto, and then they make this painting, or they commission somebody to make it for them, and they offer it to the church. So what she's using here, the same idea, and she is going to narrate, or she's going to write about her father in the same way as an ex voto. And we have the Casa Azul of Coyoacán. In Coyoacán today is a museum. She was nursed by an indigenous woman. So here we have her nurse and I. And then she's going to marry Diego Rivera. And here we have a representation of that union. She is identified as a wife of the maestro, of the teacher. She was also a painter, but she did not consider herself at the time as important as he was. She is using her traditional dress that nobody would use. Of course, indigenous people would in probably in small towns, but she's going to bring it back to her own image. She's going to also use some Aztec beads, as you find in the photograph right here. And she takes this photograph for inspiration for her portrait with her husband. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I wanted to finish with this. So as you see, there is a tradition that came very late to paint a portrait of a family. Even though we see that in different moments, from the Roman Empire, through the Middle Ages, through the Dutch Golden Era, until the 19th and 20th century, we have a transition of different ways of representing families. An official one from an emperor, a holy family, a family of wealth that wants to show off, and then we have the self-portrait of a family of an artist. And I hope you have enjoyed today's class. And if you have any questions or comments, just put the microphone on and please do. Anybody?
As always, great class.
Thank you.
This was fascinating, really informative. Thank you so much, Batia.
Thank you, Batia. Good to see you.
Batia, do you want to talk a little bit about your next one before we leave?
Sure. The next one, let me just check the date because I just don't remember.
Oh, the
July-
next one
July
is on the
25th.
25th.
25th. Thank you.
Yeah, the
No.
25th.
On the
Tuesday.
25th, yes, a Tuesday again, we're going to talk about the Impressionist lifestyle because they painted their family. They are so aware of just representing common life that we have many, many examples of how they painted themselves with their family, their children, their wives, mainly their wives, but some of them also children. And Pissarro is one of the best, I think, that portrayed his own family. All through the years, we have different moments where he's going to represent his own version of how they are growing up. So hopefully you can join me and the friends of the Stirling Road Library. Thank you very much also for your support. And hopefully we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.